Breaking down the legislative special session with the Speaker of the Assembly, Steve Yeager, the Democrat. It's good to see you once again, Steve. Welcome back from Carson City now.
Thank you. It's nice to be back.
So, first and foremost, I feel like everyone I've talked to about this session has described it as either frustrating, stressful, a mix of both, and other words we won't use on television. How would you describe how the special session went?
I think all those phrases are accurate. You know, this is the 6th special session I've been a part of. Only 5 regular sessions, 6 special sessions. All special sessions are difficult, right? Because you're being called into a special session by the governor because there's some emergency that needs to be addressed. So I will say this really wasn't different than any other special session. It's tough to be up there. You're short-staffed. It's not a regular session. The difference in this special session was just the sheer number of items that were in the governor's proclamation. So yeah, it was frustrating. Long days, happy to be done.
You mentioned that special sessions are for emergencies, and obviously critics of the film tax credit expansion said that measure was not an emergency. Obviously it failed. We'll talk about why in a second, but first and foremost, should it have been on the agenda in the first place? And I acknowledge the governor sets the agenda, but obviously it wouldn't have been put on the agenda if the votes weren't there, right?
Yeah, the governor does set the agenda, so there's really no standard for what constitutes an emergency. Under the Constitution, the governor decides that. I was happy to see the film tax credit legislation on the special session agenda. I think it really makes a lot of sense for Nevada. It's very much needed. I was surprised that the bill failed in the Senate. I was led to believe that they had the votes over in the Senate. Obviously, we passed it during the regular session in the Assembly, and it was the same vote, 22-20, but it took us a while to get that out. But, you know, that was ultimately the governor's choice to put that on the agenda, and I think he believed the votes were there as well.
The first day of the special session, I was there as things were getting going. It seemed like a procedural vote to move the film tax credit bill into committee, and it was kind of thrown into what seemed like a bit of chaos and confusion on the floor when Assemblymember LaRue Hatch sort of asked for a vote on the floor. Did you know that was coming, and what is your response now to how that all played out?
I did not know that was coming. You know, certainly any member has the right to use the rules to try to do that, but essentially what was attempted was to just kill the bill before it even got a hearing in a committee. Usually professional courtesy would dictate that you tell the speaker you're going to try something like that. That didn't happen for whatever reason. The vote failed, so it did go to committee. Now I'll say this, they have the right to do it, but it doesn't make it right. I mean, you think about the amount of work that went into drafting that bill, the amount of people who were in the building, both in Carson City and Las Vegas, who wanted to testify on the bill. I think it would have been a real disservice to kill that bill before it even got a hearing. And frankly, I just don't know, if we're not elected to hear bills and make tough decisions, why are you in Carson City? So that was a disappointing maneuver, but we were able to defeat it. And ultimately, as you saw, the bill had robust hearings in both houses. I think something like 10 or 12 hours among the 2 hearings.
You mentioned that there's a certain level of professional courtesy, certainly within the Democratic Party, that you're suggesting you expected that you didn't get. But the fact that it even happened in the first place, yes, it made its way out of the Assembly. The fact that there was this contention hanging over this session, and specifically this bill, is it proof that maybe it's a bad bill? It's just, it's not great. It should be reworked.
Well, I think that's the point of the hearing, right? And the bill was different than what it was in the regular session. There were improvements made. I would say, I don't think it was a bad bill. It was a contentious bill, right? The vote was 22-20, which is as close of a vote as you're ever going to get in the Assembly. Same vote as the regular session. And I acknowledge that there can be very strong opinions on both sides. But we're in a majority rule state, and we had 22 votes in favor, and that was Democrats and Republicans both in support and in opposition. I just think it would have been a real disservice to not even hear the bill. You know, it was on the proclamation. We were there to do other business. We certainly should hear the bill, and I voted for it because I think it was a great opportunity for the state of Nevada, and I'm sad that it failed because I think we're going to miss out on a new industry and a lot of jobs.
I'm always interested in this because when I'm up there for the short amount of time that I'm up there, there's hearings, and then there's a lot of nothing. And lawmakers are behind closed doors, and I guess you guys are whipping votes. Specific with the film tax credit bill, and I guess other items as well, what was that vote whipping effort like behind the scenes? How challenging was it? How contentious was it? What was that friction that maybe we didn't see on the floor, but was happening behind closed doors?
truthfully, in the assembly, I think most people had their minds pretty much made up before we got there, right? It was always going to be close. But it was, there were maybe 3 or 4 individuals who were kind of on the fence. So I think a lot of what happens behind the scenes is working on the amendments. I mean, there were a number of amendments to that bill, and it just takes time for legal, right? Because legal is not fully staffed or working on other matters. So most of that waiting time is really just waiting for amendments to be drafted, which can take, several hours to do. I know the advocates for the bill were talking to individuals, mostly just making sure, that the yes votes were still yes votes and trying to talk to the no votes to figure out if there's anything they could do to get them to yes. But, with any other bill, like if this bill is important to you, you're going to lobby it, you're going to have meetings, you're going to talk to folks.
But I feel like this one, at least certainly from critics' points of view, was maybe more forceful, whether it was Republican Minority Leader on the Senate side, Robin Titus, other Democrats who suggested that there was a very forceful effort, whether it was by other lawmakers or lobbyists, to get this through. Was it anything extra in terms of the lobbying effort than maybe for other measures?
I didn't see that from my vantage point.
Well, you already supported it, so they're not going to lobby you.
Sure, but I mean, from the outside, I didn't see that happening. I think, what you saw here was this bill really got people fired up, either for or against, right? And when you're in a regular session, you have thousands of bills that take people's attention. We're in the special session, we had, maybe a dozen, 15 bills. So I think you just saw more of a concerted effort on that bill, but I certainly didn't see anything that I thought crossed the line or was inappropriate. And I would expect lobbyists to do what they do. They lobby.
Yeah. Final question on the film tax credit bill. Senator Roberta Lang suggested that it could come back in some form in 2027. Do you think film tax credits or some other kind of tax incentives should be used to diversify our economy in the next legislative session?
Yeah, great question. I don't know if it's going to come back. I mean, I wish we lived in a world where states did not compete against one another and nobody gave out tax credits. It's just not the world we live in, right? And so my position on this has always been that Nevada has to be a player in this game. We did it with Tesla, for instance. Whatever you think of Tesla and Elon Musk, that was a big deal for our state. So I think it's going to be on the table. Whether a legislator brings it, how that goes, who knows? The composition of the legislature is going to be different. There are a lot of assembly members who aren't coming back. So I think that'll be, we'll have to see how that plays out leading up to the February 2027 session.
We'll come back to that regarding lawmakers leaving Carson City in a second in your future. But just finally, broader, beyond the film tax credit bill, the fact that there was, maybe it is connected to the film tax credit bill, this sort of dispute among Democrats on this measure, does it say anything about the Democratic caucus in the Assembly and the Senate, this sort of division over this highly contentious bill? Does it lead to any possible challenges in the future, you think, for the party?
I mean, the Democratic caucus, just like the Republican caucus, we're not monolithic, right? We've got a range of opinions in that caucus. I think that makes our caucus stronger. This just happened to be an issue that really divided the caucus. But as you said, it divided the Republican caucus as well. So I'm not particularly concerned about that. Most legislation the caucus will get behind, but there are going to be things like economic incentives that always tend to divide the caucus. And it's just give it your best shot, and if the votes are there, the votes are there.
Despite the challenges, would you consider the special session a success, and why?
I would. I think we passed some really important legislation. For instance, the SNAP-like assistance program, that was vital. School safety, to try to eliminate some of these accidents that are happening on school grounds, I think was crucial. And then we had to go in to replenish our emergency funds and the IFC contingency account because we use that money to set up food banks. So those things in particular, I think they had to be done in a special session. And now if the federal government pulls back on SNAP, we have a state program that we're ready to launch right away. And I think that's critically important for the state.
You mentioned some of the changes that are taking place in the Democratic caucus up in Carson City. You're not running for re-election in the Assembly. Your colleague, Senator Howdegee's not running in the Assembly. Nicole Cannizzaro, the Senate Majority Leader, also. Specifically for you, what's next after you leave as Speaker of the Assembly?
That's a great question. I honestly don't know what's next. I'm going to take some time to think about that, probably get through the holidays. But I really want to think about what makes sense for me. I mean, I've been in public office for 10 years. It's been incredibly satisfying, but also incredibly taxing personally and professionally. So I want to make sure I find something that's fulfilling, that I can give back to my community. So continuing to have those conversations, but I'm really committed to making the second half better than the first half.
Okay. There was obviously speculation, as I'm sure you're aware, that you were going to run for Clark County Commission. You're not. Did it ever cross your mind? Did you ever consider the idea of running for that seat, District F?
Once I knew that Commissioner Jones wasn't going to run for re-election, I did very seriously consider it. I talked to commissioners, I looked into what the job was, and ultimately what I decided was my heart just wasn't into that role. I think it would have been a hard transition going from speaker to being a county commissioner. So because I didn't believe I could fully invest myself in that race and in that role, I decided not to do it, which I know is a surprise to many, but I've never been someone who does something because people think I should or it's the next logical step. I've got to do what's right for me, and at this time, it was not right for me.
Soon to be private citizen, Speaker of the Assembly, Steve Yeager, the Democrat. Thanks for coming in. We appreciate it, and we'll talk in the future. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course.